Hey guys, this is my first video, so I'm just going to do a brief introduction on how this will all work out to start with. Normally, that is. Basically, I'm normally going to post a theory or philosophical concept and include my own opinion on whichever topic I'll be discussing. That'll be the general layout of these videos, and I'd love if you guys commented or posted on my Facebook page's walls. If you ever feel like discussing my theory, possibly if you want to argue with it, whatever the case may be. I'll link the page's names in the description. I'm completely open to criticism, and really am just doing these because people have often asked me to do so, as they seem to respect my opinion on various subjects, so I figured I might as well do them. But anyway, the topic I'm going to be covering today is the idea of objectivity and subjectivity. I'm going to start you off with an example to give you a brief idea of what subjectivity really is. I assume you guys have all studied a text in English class at some point in time. For example, I am currently studying this, which is The Great Gatsby. Now, when you read a book, and when I read a book, or someone else reads the same book, for example, if I read this and you too read this, you're going to pick up on different themes and quotations to what I might pick up on, because we'll have our own personal thoughts and experiences which will dictate what we can relate to in the text, and naturally those are going to be very different. That's really a simple definition of subjectivity. When I read this text, I'm actually creating, in a sense, my own version of the book, because how I read it will always be slightly different to how the author wished it to be read and interpreted. This is what I call impressionable perception, the idea that I'm unconsciously forcing my own experiences and personality onto this text, in this example, which therefore determines how I perceive the phrasing of the text. Now that I've used a specific example as an introduction, let me go into more detail about this theory of impressionable perception and show you just how powerful it really is. It's definitely way more powerful than simply reading a book in a unique way. Okay, putting the book aside, I'm going to show you something else. I have here in my hands a really nice, you can see it, really nice light silk blue scarf. But is it really blue? That's what I'm going to be talking about. Now you might be thinking, what the hell are you talking about, you ignorant child? It's clearly a blue scarf. Well, you could be right, but you could also be wrong. That is the fundamental principle of impressionable perception. You see, I see a blue scarf. You will see a blue scarf. But what is a scarf? It's the same scarf after all. But what is a scarf, or even the color blue? Plato talked about the idea of a world of forms, in which you would instinctively know that something was a blue scarf because you had seen a perfect blue scarf in this spiritual world. Basically, it's a spiritual utopia of sorts. That's what Plato described it as. I have a different theory though. Again, back to this idea of impressionable perception. Consequence, actions, objects. What do these things have in common? Well, they all exist, but they exist without a form of their own perception, which means that they are, put really basically, not alive. They simply exist without the characteristics of perception. But what does that actually mean? It means that they are without emotion, they are without attachment or anything like that, and that is incredibly important to understand, guys. Let me explain further with an example. I have here a pen. I'm about to throw this pen across my room. See that? Pen's over there. Consequence is that I threw the pen over there. It flew through the air and now it's over there at the other side of the room. That's it. That's the consequence. The pen cannot perceive the action. It just occurred. But what if I had hit a human? He'd probably get really pissed off with me for having thrown a pen at him, and rightfully so, I would be too. And this is what I've been coming on to. People would often state that because I knew the human was there, threw the pen at him anyway, and he got understandably annoyed at being hurt, we'd call the consequence of me throwing the pen bad. But is the consequence itself actually bad? No. The consequence is just a consequence. It doesn't have any of its own definition. That's the important thing. Humans would define it as being bad. We impress upon it that the consequence is a bad one. Good and bad are human definitions that would, in this case, be used to describe the neutral result that is a simple change, an emotionless consequence. That is really important. This subjectivity, this impressionable perception that seems to be inherently human, can be seen absolutely everywhere. Take the words I'm speaking right now. You can understand them because somebody at some point in time has defined certain words to relate to certain concepts and objects. Say I've got the same pen from earlier, well, the same type of pen. You know this is a pen because you can clearly tell it's a pen because we relate the word pen to the image of a pen and to the function of a pen, so it's been defined as such. Now for the really important bit. This might go over your head, but hopefully I can explain it if you don't get it straight away, so don't worry if it does. Here it is. The consequence of impressionable perception is total and utter relativism. Think about that for a second. If it makes sense to you, and you see where I'm coming from, that's pretty awesome. But if you don't, let me try and explain it to you. If humans inherently interpret everything differently by simple human nature and perception itself, after all, we are all unique beings, both in body and mind. No two humans are completely genetically identical. Therefore, our experiences will always differ, and as such, our perception will also always differ as a consequence. Then, as a result from this, everything must be completely relative to our own perception. You might state at this point, hang on, what about constants like laws, moral absolutism as a concept, that sort of thing? Don't get me wrong, I'm not denying the existence of said laws, but it's not a contradiction. Why? Because they too are relative to perception itself. You perceive them as being absolutes in our society. However, what you perceive can never really be the exact same thing as the actual intended meaning or absolute. This can be used to explain why good people commit atrocious crimes. We often hear the cliche, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, this is my point. This shows subjectivity. One man's bad decisions, which would lead to the hell in this case, is another man's good intentions. It's all down to the fact that someone looks at something differently to another person. Let me just go a bit further before concluding. I stated often throughout this video that impressionable perception is incredibly important, but I haven't really given you an actual reason quite yet, but I've hinted at it. Now I will. Because everything is based upon man's perception, as philosophers such as Descartes would state, there is no such things as absolutes. Extremes, yes. Universal laws, no. Look at science, it's constantly being revised. We often forget that there is no such thing as actual proof. Everything is inductive, everything is inferred, because there is no such thing as fact. Only hypotheses. Why? Because while we can only perceive to a limit, our perception is limited. For example, there might be a huge amount of dimensions that we cannot perceive that have the possibility of totally throwing the most innate laws of physics completely on their head, or what we perceive to be the most innate laws of physics, such as gravitational pull and Newton's famous three. But we can only perceive, at least currently, 3 dimensions, and therefore we base our laws, or what we consider to be the laws of the universe, around this concept of there only being 3 dimensions, because we assume, based on our perception, that there only are 3 dimensions. That's the flaw of perception. Impressionable perception is subconscious, but it is also inherently arrogant of mankind. We feel the need to classify things, to quantify things, to attempt to explain things when in reality we don't actually know for certain anything, because everything that we understand, or think we understand, key, is merely our perception and not the actual event. I'm staying deliberately away from the majority of epistemology. That's a debate for another day, but I will go so far as to say what I'm claiming here. But I digress. To sum up, impressionable perception is, I believe, an inherent part of human nature, which shows us that nothing is fact. Instead, put colloquially, at best a guesstimate, an inference on what we perceive, on what is actually there. That's what I want to make very clear today. What we perceive and the actual consequence, the actual action, the object itself, may be totally and utterly different, because our perception is both limited and it can be falsified. For example, we trust our senses, but our eyes can play tricks on us, like when we see mirages in deserts or when we get drunk. That's really all I have to say on this. I hope that wasn't too difficult to understand. You'll have to excuse my rather immature mind and understanding of the concepts that I'm trying to convey here. But I do ask you to remember that this is completely theoretical. I mean, it's a theory that I believe in and that I came up with, but nevertheless, it is entirely theoretical in nature. And so you're completely free to think what you want of it, or disagree, or whatever you might consider. And that's another thing. Really, consideration is an amazing thing. It means you don't have to formulate a finalized opinion on something. Consideration means you take it into account. That's what I like doing. I never really finalize my opinion on anything because everything's in a constant state of fluctuation anyway. But anyway, if you've actually watched this entire thing, thank you so much, because that takes a lot of dedication. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.